When you have a legal issue that you want to take to court, you can't just institute an action in any court of your choosing. In Nigeria, we have a tiered court system, which means there are superior courts and there are inferior courts, and each court has its own jurisdiction. So you have to follow the hierarchy of the courts, which is the arrangement of courts in order of seniority. I'll start from the most senior courts and descend. The highest court in all of Nigeria is the Supreme Court. Below the Supreme Court is the Court of Appeal. Below the Court of Appeal is the Federal High Court, and every state of the Federation has a Federal High Court. And then below the Federal High Court is the National Industrial Court, and below that one is High Court of the Federal Capital Territory and High Court of other states. And then you have the Sharia Court of Appeal of the FCT and other states. You have the Customary Court of Appeal of the FCT and other states. Then you have the Magistrate Court, and below the Magistrate Court is the Sharia and Customary Court. And then there are special courts such as election tribunals, rent tribunals, coroner's court, and juvenile courts. Depending on the kind of matter you have, you must consider the jurisdiction of the courts because for your case to succeed, the court has to have jurisdiction to hear your matter. Before we look at which court handles which case, let's learn what court jurisdiction means. Court jurisdiction refers to a court's authority to hear and decide specific types of cases. This means that each court has a specific type of case that it handles. Now let's go to which court handles which case. And the first one is the Supreme Court. It deals with cases of dispute between the federal government and states or between state governments. So if state governments have issues, they go to the Supreme Court. And then you have the Court of Appeal. It handles cases of questions concerning the office of the president or vice president, whether either have been validly elected into office. The Federal High Court has jurisdiction over civil cases relating to the revenue of the federal government of Nigeria. Such cases include admiralty, copyright, banking cases, treason, taxation, customs, and treasonable felony. The National Industrial Court handles matters relating to labor, industrial, trade union and industrial relations, and environment, and conditions of work, health, safety, and welfare of labor. The High Courts of the Federal Capital Territory and High Courts of States, they deal with civil proceedings to determine the right, duty, liability, interest, obligation, or claim. And when it comes to criminal proceedings, it handles matters relating to penalty, forfeiture, punishment in respect of any offense committed by any person. So you have a case of someone violating your rights. For example, you go to High Court of the FCT or State High Court. Then you have the Sharia Court of Appeal of the FCT and of states, and it entertains appeals from Sharia courts with regards to cases of Islamic personal law such as marriage, guardianship, will, and succession. Then Customary Court of Appeal of FCT and states, and they entertain appeals from customary courts concerning questions of customary law. And then you have the Magistrate Court. It has summary jurisdiction in civil and criminal matters. It deals with small offenses such as petty theft of items of low value, and it has a monetary limit to the matters they can entertain. For example, in Lagos, magistrate courts have a financial limit of 10 million. So any case that exceeds the value of 10 million when it comes to civil proceedings, they don't handle it. And when it comes to criminal proceedings, they handle cases with a value of 100K. And then you have the customary courts are usually in the southern part of Nigeria, and it deals with matters relating to native law and custom. Then you have the Sharia courts. They're usually found in the northern part of Nigeria, and they handle Islamic cases. Lastly, we have the courts that are set up for certain purposes such as juvenile courts, election tribunals, coroner's courts, and we can infer from their names what they're meant for. So we can't talk about hierarchy of courts and jurisdiction without talking about appeal. Aside having jurisdiction concerning the subject matters, that's the kind of cases they can entertain, most of the courts that we've mentioned also have appellate jurisdiction. This means that they have the power to entertain appeals from lower courts. When we say appeal, it means a legal proceeding whereby a case is brought before a higher court for review of the decision of a lower court. For example, If you've instituted a Sharia case in a Sharia court of your state concerning marriage or inheritance or any other problem you're encountering, and the court has given judgment but you're not satisfied with it and you feel the judgment should have been in your favor, you can appeal to an upper Sharia court, and if you're still not satisfied with the decision of the upper Sharia court, you move to the Sharia Court of Appeal of your state, and if you're still not satisfied, then you move to the Court of Appeal, and then from the Court of Appeal, if you're still not satisfied, you go to the Supreme Court. Whatever decision the Supreme Court gives is final because there are no more higher courts to appeal to. Another example, if you institute a case at the Magistrate Court, you appeal to the High Court of a state, and from the High Court of a state, you move to the Court of Appeal and then to the Supreme Court. If you start a case at the State High Court, you appeal to the Court of Appeal and then to the Supreme Court. If you start a case from the Federal High Court, you appeal to the Court of Appeal and then to the Supreme Court. If you start a case at the Customary Court, you appeal to the Customary Court of Appeal of your state and then to the Court of Appeal and you move to the Supreme Court. If you start a case from the Court of Appeal, then you can only appeal to the Customary Court. If a case is started as a Supreme Court, well, you already know it's not going anywhere from there. So that's on hierarchy and jurisdiction of courts today. Like and follow for more legal insights.